Alright, little peoples, the next thing we're going to try to do here is we're going to create a 2-page spread. Now your simple project this week is going to be to do the same thing with a biography of you, a little description of who you are, a couple of pictures of who you are, and then kind of fill it in as you want. It can be as simple as something like this. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this spread, and if you look at it, we've got quite a few different frames going on. On this left hand side you can see the colors that we have. These are all neutral frames that have been colored up in the top here. We have 4 separate pictures that I'm going to use for this advertisement for traveling to Greece. And then I've got a couple of paragraphs about Greece and a little quote in the middle. You're going to need to find your versions of this. I'll attach the Greek files in the classroom, but if you want to do this for someplace else, that is perfectly fine. I've got Greece on my bucket list. If your bucket list is you want to go to Ireland or Japan or wherever you want to go, find some images for that. So I'm going to give you just a couple minutes. Feel free to pause the video. Go find 4 images of any place you want to go, and then find some kind of article. It can be straight off of Wikipedia for all I care, just some text that you can copy and paste. So have those tabs pulled up. So for example, these are the images I found for Greece, and I typed in travel to Greece, and I found this little thing that says why visit Greece, and that's what I've copied and pasted. So just have that so you know where it is and you can get to it. Alright. So we're going to start like new, so I want you to hit File, New, Document, and we're going to keep things pretty similar to how we did them before. We're just going to do a little bit different. So here, I want you to type in your name, -spreads. I'm going to change my units to inches again so that I understand them a little better. It's 8.5 by 11. This is your standard size piece of paper. We need 2 pages here. And right here you'll see the option that says facing pages. So if I go back and I look at Kendrick Lamar real quick, I can see that he's one single page by himself, whereas this is 2 pages side by side. So that's what facing pages stands for. So I'm going to do File, New again, excuse me. So we want to make sure that that facing pages is checked as you go through this. Come on, computer, you got this. If you don't, what you'll end up is having single pages kind of floating along by themselves. Good Lord. There we go. Trip-spreads. Alright, so again, units down to inches, 2 pages. They are marked as facing pages. Now, primary text frame means that it goes ahead and fills in a frame for you right off the bat. I don't want you to use that. I want you to leave that unchecked. I'm going to leave columns at 2 where I was, and the column gutter I'm going to leave the same, but you should know what that is. That's this space between your 2 columns right there. Margins and bleeds, we've talked about those a little bit, but for now we're just going to leave them like they are. So if you've got what I've got, hit create. Ooh, and it lied to us. Actually, it didn't. Alright, so one thing that InDesign does is that it always creates a cover page. So if I go back to this one and look, I can see that this is kind of my standalone cover page. The first page is always by itself. So we need to fix this real quick. If I were to create a new page, so again in your Pages panel, if I were to create a new page right here, it would come up right beside number 2. And continually, if I go down and keep creating pages, they're going to all end up beside each other. But I don't want to leave that random 1 page blank. And if you zoom out, you can see all of these pages just like your Pages panel. So I'm going to click on that and I'm going to delete that extra page. So what I want you to do is in your Pages panel to the right, you'll see this little hamburger icon. I want you to click on that. And down at the bottom it's got this thing that says allow document pages to shuffle. What that means is if I move page 1 to 2, it'll take all of its content with it and stay in that same layout. I want to leave that unchecked though. It's checked currently, but I want to click on that and uncheck it. What that'll do is it'll allow me to grab page 2 in the Pages panel here and just drag it up next to page 1 so that they're next to each other. So let's do that. All right, so I'm going to zoom back in. Thank you. Now the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and frame out my basic design. So if we look at our final version here, we can see that we have text in our far right column, and then we've got this little gridded system of boxes that we need to create. So let's start by using our frame tool, F for frame tool. And I'm going to go ahead and create a text frame, or it's currently a neutral frame, to cover this whole right side. So I know not to go over there. Next, I'm going to make a basic square. Remember to hold shift as you do this. And if you look to the bottom right, you'll see measurements for this. I'm going to leave mine at about 2 inches, this box. You could also just click down and type in 2 inches by 2 inches and hit OK. So that's perfectly fine too. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one, and then I'm going to duplicate. Now remember, duplicate, I just hold Option or Alt on a PC, and I'm going to click, hold, and drag down. I want to put this like at the corner here. You see how the corners are almost touching but not quite? I'm going to place it right there. Now I'm going to grab both of these. You can hold shift and click on each one, or you can kind of click, hold, and drag over top like that. Come on, mouse, where you at? And then I'm going to go right here to this corner, hold it, and hold shift to rotate these to stand up perfectly straight like that. Now if they're not identical or like even, if they're one's off to the side, like you see this bottom one's just slightly to the left of the right one, you can always go to your align panel and just click on your alignment options to make sure they're straight. So that's my first set of squares or diamonds. I'm going to duplicate those two together like this, and notice I'm trying to keep an even amount of spacing between them so that this little gap right here is equal on all sides as best as I can make it. I'm going to hold Option again, and this time you'll start to notice these smart guides, these little green things popping up. Use those, they'll help align what you're doing. So I'm just going to kind of stair these up. I'm going to keep creating, trying to keep an equal amount of spacing. And I need one more set. There, you should have 12 squares in total to create that grid system. Now, what I need to do is I need to change them because they're not quite big enough. So I'm going to select all of them. And to do that, you just kind of click, hold, and lasso over all of this so that you have it all selected. I'm going to grab at the corner here just like I did before, but this time I'm going to hold shift and make these a little bigger so that they come about to that column line. They don't have to touch it, but they can get close. And maybe I want it a little further on the left here. I want to make sure it's kind of centered, so I'm going to move it around a little bit, and I'll see that pink line pop up. That's another smart guide showing you the middle of your document. So that's where I'll release. Alright, so that is my basic layout. I know it looks a little odd right off the bat, and it's hard to kind of see how this is going to become something when you're just looking at these neutral frames. But the layout part of this is essential when it comes to designing in InDesign. Being able to see these frames and kind of mentally picture the final product is something that takes time to get used to, but it's not as bad as it looks. It's not as hard as it looks. Alright, so our 4 squares on each side are going to be our colors. Our middle 4 here are going to be our images. Now before we go any further, I want to notice that this black line in the center here is your actual page line. So when a magazine is folded, you open it up like this, and you have this line in the middle where the pages are merged together. And at that spot, you tend not to want to put any kind of material because you're not going to be able to see it properly, because in that fold, it's going to distort your imagery. But in this case, we're going to break the rules a little bit. All right, so I'm going to start down here on this frame. I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm going to choose a color. Now, you can kind of pick whatever colors you want with this. I'm not going to argue with whatever colors you want to play with. If you're doing, Italy, you probably want to do like reds and greens, right? If you're doing Japan, like kind of whites and reds. I mean, it's up to you how you're going to do this. But as far as my color, I'm going to choose variants of gray with a little touch of blue in there. So I'm going to choose registration or black for my first color. And right here where it says tint, I'm just going to change that to 10. So it's kind of a light gray. My next one up, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to choose a 50% gray there. And on my top one, I'm going to choose just black with an 80% gray. Now this one standing alone is where I'm going to add my color. Now you'll see right here you're kind of limited to your color choices, but you can always go to color over here and you can start kind of dragging around if you want, or you can go to your toolbar right here and notice that this RGB space view is a little different from Photoshop and Illustrator, but it's basically the same thing. You can kind of drag up and find any color of the rainbow that you're looking for there. So being it's grease, I'm going to add a blue. Now, I want to duplicate this in reverse over here. So I'm going to click on this frame and I want to take a moment to notice something on your tools. In your tools, the first eyedropper that you'll see has these little boxes down here. That's a color theme tool. I don't use that very often. I prefer just messing with the eyedropper tool, so I suggest you kind of clicking on that and getting your eyedropper tool so you can use that instead. So I've got this frame selected over here and I'm just going to click on that color to duplicate it. I'll do the same with my next frame. I'll select it, hit I, and get my color here. And again, I'm hitting V in between. So V for as in Victor and I as in eyedropper to get my colors, select my frames, and move them over like that. Awesome. Alright, so that is my color to this layout. Now I need to add my images. Now the images are a little odd here because we rotated this frame 45 degrees. And the frame is the frame. It's going to put the picture where it is. It doesn't matter that the frame is rotated 45 degrees. The picture is going to come in rotated that same 45 degrees. And in fact, if you look up here in your control bar, clicked on any of these frames, you'll see that rotation. It's at negative 45 degrees. That's how I rotated it. You might have gone plus 45. That's fine if you did. But we're going to have to adjust our images for that. Now, there's a few ways you can place pictures in InDesign. I showed you one in the last video. File place is the quickest way to go about it. Command D or Control D is another way. And this is all with the frame selected. I'm doing that. But I'm going to do something a little different here. And you can do whatever way works for you. I'm going to deselect everything. I'm going to click off. And then I'm going to hit Command D. So I've got no frame selected whatsoever. I've created a folder called Grease right here. I'm going to kind of look at my pictures at what I have and what I want to use. I want you to have found at least 4 images of wherever you want to go, and I want you to use those pictures for this as well. So I'm going to pick that picture. I kind of like that one. I like that one as well. I like that one. And I like that one. Alright, so I'm going to hold Command and click on each one of these pictures that I want. And that'll give me the 4 pictures. Now when I hit Open, I want you to notice that your image is now kind of following along your mouse. And it's also got a number 4 in it. That's for the 4 images that you have. Notice when I'm not on a frame, right here at the corner, it's got a little dotted square. But when I go over a frame, it kind of circles. So when I hover over these frames and click, it'll place that image inside of that frame, just like that. Now, a couple of things to note. First, they're all rotated at that 45-degree angle, which is a problem. But not only that, they are blurry, some of them. If you didn't see it in the Kendrick Lamar picture, that was blurry too. InDesign does this because it's the most RAM-intensive program that we're going to see in visual design. So if you think about Photoshop, you've got one document, you might have 100 pictures on it doing all kinds of stuff with effects, but it's still one document. Illustrator is a little bit more, but they're all vector, which are smaller than your raster images that you would see in Photoshop. InDesign, however, can have hundreds of pages, thousands of pages. And this can take up a lot of space in memory when you're sitting here kind of scrolling through hundreds of pages, right? So it knocks down the quality that you're seeing of your images so that it doesn't crash. InDesign likes to crash. It's just a way of life. So the fact that they're blurry isn't a problem here. You want to check it before you print it that it's not actually blurry, but as far as InDesign goes, it's fine. If you really want to double check it, you can go up here to View, Display Performance, and instead of typical display, you can do high quality display, which is what I'd recommend for the time being. We're not doing anything too intensive on this. And when you click high quality display, all of a sudden your pictures look a lot better. Alright, so we need to fix these pictures. Now, we need to talk about these two tools right here. Your black arrow and your white arrow. Your selection tool and your direct selection tool. The black arrow is key for working your frames. The white arrow, the direct selection tool, is about working what's inside of the frames. So for the time, our frames are set where they need to be, so for the time we're going to use our direct selection tool, our white arrow. Now, if I hover over these images, I will see these yellow lines pop up around the outside, these orange lines, and that is your actual image. So when I click here on this image, I get my bounding box. Now, this bounding box works just like all the other Adobe programs. I can click at the corners and I can hold shift and I can rotate this. Well, I can't rotate it, excuse me. And I can shrink this down as I want to fit this frame. Now, the rotation aspect is up here at the top. Now, if you've got your black arrow selected, let me just make a mistake before you do. If you have your black arrow selected and you've got this blue box, this blue bounding box, and you change this down to 0, that's what it's going to do. It's going to move your frame. It's going to put it down to a 0 rotation and flip it around. That's not what we want. If you've got your white arrow and you're seeing this orange bounding box, it'll still look the same up here, but when I go to 0 on that, it'll rotate the image inside the frame. And as you see, it almost rotated it out of the frame. That's fine. You can always click on it, hold, drag it back in. So I'm going to fix that image so that I don't see any white on the corners. Be very careful because that's easy to do. And I want the picture to kind of fit in there. It's going to crop out a large chunk of this picture. That's fine. I'll need to repeat that step for the other 4 images. So I'm going to click with my white arrow on this flag. I'm going to go to 0 on my rotation, and then I'm going to scale this image down to fit how I want it to fit. And don't, if you're cutting things off that are specific to you, that's fine. It's going to happen. With this, it's kind of a little more artsy, right? We're not trying to see the whole image. Remember, if you hold Shift and Option, it'll shrink to the center. I'm sorry, that's Alt and Shift on a PC. And some of your images may come in very large, like this one. If I zoom out, look at how big that picture is. It is huge. So make sure you zoom out, Command plus or Control plus and Command minus or Command, or good Lord, Control or Command minus and plus. There we go. And remember to flip that rotation. And if it does something like this where that orange is completely out of your frame, you can't really grab it and move it properly. I hold down on my arrows or left on my arrows to where I need it so that I can see that little piece, and then I can move it into place. Alright, so those are my images. They look good. I like them. I probably shouldn't have done 2 of these, but it'd be alright. Alright, so now let's talk about the quick little batch of text over here. I'm going to leave this kind of up to you. I want you to give me something that would entice somebody to travel to the location that you're picking. So I'm just going to put a simple tagline up here, travel to Greece. I want you to play around with your fonts. Feel free to find something that's a little different. Try to match it to the area that you're sending to. So if you're sending me to Japan, try something that kind of has that feel to it, right? If I'm going to Greece, I probably want something a little old school looking. I'm not really seeing anything right off the top here. We'll go with you for now. Right. So give me an interesting font there. And then we need to go find your article. So this is my article. You can find a shorter one or a longer one. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to Command C or Control C here to copy it. And I'm just going to paste it right in here. Now, the problem you're going to have is that it's going to come in the same font as this. Probably the same size. And as you see, I've got a little red plus symbol, which is a no-no. Now the biggest problem here is that I can't just highlight and select everything down there, and as you'll see I try to and I'll shrink down and you see I've still got more text down there that's not working. So Command A will select everything and you can kind of change the size of it so that it fits here. Now you may have to go back and resize your heading. Alright, so I'm going to pick a kind of basic font. In fact, if you want to just do Minion Pro, I'm not going to argue with that. I'm going to do Minion Pro regular, and right here between my two paragraphs, I'm going to hit a few enters or returns to kind of drop it down. I'm going to highlight the entirety of this, and I'm going to make it just a little bigger, about a 14-point text. Remember, anything under 6 you can't read, so you want to stay above that. And I'm going to push my leading up because I always like a nice leaded look, something that's kind of spaced between. In fact, I'll push the font size down to about 12 just so I can make my leading a little bigger. Alright, the last thing I'm going to include here is a quote. So where did my quote go? 13 quotes about Greece. Woody Allen says, I wonder if Socrates and Plato had houses on Crete during the summer. Probably did. Rich people. Alright, so I'm going to place this right here in between. I'm going to make this a bold, condensed. In fact, I'll go ahead and put it back into that Rockwell font that I've got for the heading. That way we've got some consistency. I'll make it a little bigger so that it feels like that. Alright, so that's my basic layout. I've got my heading of Travel to Greece. I've got a subheading type font here with a little bit different quote. There we go. I've got my paragraph text. It looks pretty good. It's nice and spaced out. It makes it not hard to read. In fact, you can go further than that if you want to. In fact, now that I see I got some extra space, I might just do that. And I want you to kind of play around with this. Make this your spread. Now, one other thing I will point out is that I have a lot of white space on this document. Now, white space isn't necessarily white. If I had a blue background here, it would still be called white space. But sometimes a minimalist look isn't necessarily a bad thing. As long as you're doing everything that you've got well, then minimalism's good. It's if you do little things bad that minimalism starts to look ugly. Alright, so one more shortcut. I want you to look at the W key on your keyboard. If you hit W, you will get a preview version of what the final version of this looks like without all those random lines all over the place. And I think that looks pretty freaking good. Yeah, boy. So I'm excited to see what you come up with on this. This is going to be very similar to your simple project. I want you to kind of play around with that as well. If you've got this, take a screenshot of it, turn it into the Google Classroom. I'd like to see it without these lines, so hit that W on it so I can see exactly what you've created.